A judge mocked Karoline Leavitt right in court, but minutes later, Attorney General Pam Bondi had him in handcuffs. You won't believe what just unfolded. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the latest updates. In the courtroom in Chicago, Illinois, laughter rang out against her, filling the air with a mocking echo that seemed to bounce off the walls. But this defendant, oh friend, she wasn't the person everyone thought they knew. She arrived armed to the teeth, not with weapons, of course, but with a preparation that was about to rewrite the rules of this judicial game. The place was packed to the brim like one of those high-profile cases you see on TV, not some routine hearing that slips by unnoticed. People whispered non-stop, their voices blending into a constant low hum that enveloped the room like a cloud of curiosity and tension. At the heart of that human storm stood Karoline Leavitt, a young black woman, a former White House press secretary who couldn't have been more than 17 when she first stepped into the political spotlight. Her sneakers squeaked faintly every time she shifted on the cold, polished courtroom floor, a sound that pierced the silence like a tiny act of defiance. But you know what struck me? She didn't seem nervous. Not one bit. She wasn't the trembling figure you'd expect from someone accused of a serious crime. Her face was calm, serene, and her hands steady as rocks, not a single quiver. The judge, though, that man wasn't about to be impressed so easily. Judge Michael Carter settled into his chair, his sturdy frame almost spilling over the seat, his robe hanging off him like he'd thrown it on in a rush. From his perch, he peered down at the girl through his glasses, a sidelong glance with a sneer that screamed pure contempt. "Miss Leavitt," he drawled, dragging out her last name like it pained him to say it, like it left a bitter taste in his mouth. "Do you even have any idea what you're accused of here?" The room fell into total silence, a silence so heavy you could almost feel it. Every eye darted from the judge to the girl, waiting. She didn't flinch. She didn't stumble over her words like he probably hoped. She looked him straight in the eye with a calm that disarmed and said, "Yes, Your Honor, I understand perfectly." Carter let out a dry chuckle, leaning forward, his tone dripping with condescension. "Are you sure about that, little one? Because this isn't some after-school debate club. This is a real courtroom, a serious place." From the gallery, a few snickers broke out, as if they were in on the judge's joke. For the first time, she turned her head, letting her gaze sweep the room. The crowd, mostly older folks, well-dressed in expensive suits, their faces hardened by years of trials and prejudice, watched her like she was a curiosity, a circus act, not a flesh-and-blood person. She let them stare, unblinking. There was something in her eyes, a subtle glint, a spark, that hinted she knew far more than they could imagine. But the judge wasn't done with his performance. "I have no idea who thought it was a good idea to let her speak for herself," he went on, waving a hand in the air like he wanted to shoo her away. "This isn't a kid's game, young lady. You're not prepared for this. You don't stand a chance." Her lips parted for a split second, as if a sharp comeback was about to slip out, but then she closed them again. A faint, almost secret smile curved her mouth, and it made the gallery shift uneasily, like they sensed something big was coming, even if they couldn't name it. The judge, thinking her silence was surrender, smirked with the smugness of someone who feels victorious. "That's what I thought," he said, reveling in his supposed win. What he didn't know, what no one in that overcrowded room suspected, was that they weren't dealing with some scared teenager caught in the system's claws. No, friend, not at all. She wasn't there by accident, lost in a sea of accusation. She was there with a purpose, a mission, that would soon leave them all speechless. Before that hearing was over, every person in that courtroom was going to find out why she was there. But tell me, what could a former White House press secretary so young do in a room full of skeptics, and a judge who'd already made up his mind before she even opened her mouth? The judge tapped his pen against the desk, a sharp, clipped rhythm, like he wanted to speed up time. "Let's get this over with," he muttered through gritted teeth, glancing at the papers in front of him with a fake air of boredom. "Prosecution, proceed, please." The prosecutor, a tall man with hair slicked back with too much gel and a polished attitude that seemed rehearsed, rose from his chair with a confidence that filled the space. He shot a glance at the girl, his smile a perfect echo of the judge's. "Your Honor, this case is as clear as crystal water. The evidence speaks for itself," he said, starting to pace the room while delivering a well-practiced speech as if she didn't even exist in that moment. The defendant, a minor, was found at the crime scene in possession of materials that directly link her. "Objection!" Her voice sliced through the air like a calm, precise thunderbolt, unexpected and stopping everything cold. The prosecutor froze mid-sentence, spinning on his heels to gape at her with wide eyes. The gallery stirred, whispers swelling like a wave crashing on the shore. Judge Carter raised an eyebrow, incredulous. "Objection?" he repeated, sarcasm dripping from every syllable. "Miss Leavitt, do you even know what that word means?" "Yes, Your Honor," she replied without a shred of doubt, her voice as steady as a still lake at dawn. "The prosecutor is making assumptions about my intentions without providing any context. That's pure speculation, and it's not admissible in a courtroom." A murmur of astonishment rippled through the room like a soft breeze. The prosecutor stumbled over his words, glaring at her like she'd ruined his big moment. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular, please," he stammered, grasping for support. "No, what's irregular," she cut in with a serenity that sliced like a blade, "is the complete lack of real evidence tying me to any criminal activity." The judge slammed his gavel against the desk, with a bang that shook the air. "Enough," he barked, his face reddening like his blood was boiling. "Miss Leavitt, you're here to defend yourself, not to play lawyer. One more word out of line and I'll hold you in contempt. Do you understand?" She didn't flinch, not even a blink. "Understood, Your Honor," she said, her voice as firm and calm as ever. The prosecutor cleared his throat, trying to regain control, but she didn't give him a chance. "Permission to approach the bench," she said, cutting him off again. The gallery held its breath. A collective gasp echoed through the air. The judge stared at her, his face a mix of irritation and sheer disbelief. "You don't make demands in my courtroom," he snapped, practically spitting the words. "It's not a demand, Your Honor," she countered with a calm that defied the storm. "It's my right to present a fair and full defense. But if you're not willing to hear me, I'll file a motion to recuse you for judicial bias." Silence, a silence so deep you could hear the heartbeats in the room. The judge leaned back in his chair, narrowing his eyes, like he was trying to figure out what kind of creature stood before him. "You think you're pretty clever, don't you, Miss Leavitt?" he said after a long pause, his voice thick with suspicion. "Go ahead, approach. Let's see what you've got." She stepped forward, her sneakers squeaking again on the glossy floor. Every eye followed her, the weight of those stairs falling on her like heavy rain, but she walked as if she didn't feel it, as if the whole world couldn't touch her. She placed a stack of papers in front of the judge, her hands as steady as if carved from stone. "This is a preliminary review of the prosecution's evidence," she explained, her voice even as a gentle melody. "If you take a moment to look, you'll see half of it is circumstantial, pure guesswork, and the rest lacks a proper chain of custody." The judge skimmed the documents, his frown deepening with each page he turned. The prosecutor looked ready to explode, his face red with fury. "Your Honor, this is absurd! She can't do this!" he cried, desperate. "She can," the judge muttered, cutting him off, flipping through more pages before looking up at her. "Where did you get this, Miss Leavitt?" "I prepared it myself," she answered, simple and direct, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "And how, pray tell, does a former White House press secretary like you know how to do something like this?" he asked, incredulous. She hesitated, just for a breath, barely noticeable, then said, "I read a lot, Your Honor." The judge narrowed his eyes further but said nothing. The gallery fell silent again, everyone leaning forward in their seats, unable to help themselves. Something about this woman's confidence was starting to plant doubts in their minds. Who was she really? The judge, caught between confusion and frustration, pored over the papers again and again, searching for a flaw, a mistake, anything to dismiss it all and take back control. But there was nothing to fault. Every point she made, every argument, was built like an unassailable fortress. "Miss Leavitt," he said slowly, his tone heavy with skepticism, "where did you learn to put together something this solid?" She let a faint, almost imperceptible smile slip through, her calm unshaken. I already told you, Your Honor. I read a lot and I pay attention. The prosecutor lost it completely. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. We're wasting time. She's a press secretary. This isn't a debate club, he shouted, his voice trembling with outrage. But the judge raised a hand, silencing him instantly. His eyes locked on the woman, scanning her face like he was searching for hidden answers. Who are you, really? He asked, his question cutting through the tension like a sharpened blade. She swept her gaze across the room, a slow, deliberate move, before meeting his eyes again. I'm someone who understands the law better than most people in this room, she said, her voice steady but now with a slight edge, a spark of defiance. And I'm here to prove it, step by step. A murmur ran through the gallery again, people leaning closer, whispering theories to each other. The tension was so thick you could slice it with a knife, and the judge felt it in every fiber of his being. Enough games, he snapped, though his voice had lost some of its earlier arrogance. What's your point, Miss Leavitt? Spit it out. She took a small but meaningful step back, holding his gaze without wavering. My point, Your Honor, she said with a clarity that rang through the room, is that I'm not just a former press secretary facing trial. I'm a lawyer, and I'm here to prove it. The room erupted, French. Shouts of shock, incredulous murmurs, some exclamations slicing through the air like lightning. The prosecutor slammed the table in fury. Your Honor, this is absurd. She's lying outright, he bellowed, nearly unhinged. I'm not lying, she cut in, her tone sharper now, like tempered steel. I passed the Illinois bar exam last year. You can look me up. Karoline Leavitt, licensed attorney. The judge, jaw tight and eyes bulging, turned to the clerk. Verify it. The clerk's typing filled the silence, a frantic sound that seemed to stretch forever. The room held its breath, the air so charged with anticipation it almost hurt to breathe. Finally, the clerk looked up, eyes wide. It's true, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Karoline Leavitt is registered as an attorney with the Illinois State Bar. The gallery exploded again, louder this time, a chaos of voices that the judge tried to control by banging his gavel, but even he looked shaken, his face pale as he turned back to her. Are you telling me, he began, his voice trembling slightly, that you're a licensed attorney at your age? Yes, Your Honor, she affirmed with a firmness that left no room for doubt. I finished high school early, earned my college degree, passed the bar, and now I'm here in front of you. The prosecutor stammered, his face red with pure fury. This is highly irregular. She shouldn't. But the judge cut him off, his tone quieter, almost reflective. Allowed or not, she's here, he said, sitting back, staring at her like she was an impossible puzzle. I've never seen anything like this in all my years. Karoline tilted her head slightly, that subtle smile creeping back onto her lips. They underestimated me, Your Honor, she said with a calm that hid a quiet triumph. A lot of people in this room did. But I didn't come here to play childish games. I came to win, and to do it right. Karoline's revelation changed everything. The air in the courtroom wasn't just that of a defendant on trial anymore. It was a living force, a hurricane no one had seen coming. The judge, more serious now, leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. Very well, Miss Leavitt, he said, his voice calmer but firm as steel. You've got everyone's attention now. Let's see if you can back up those words with facts. Karoline took a deep breath, her composure intact, and turned to the prosecutor with a look that said, "Get ready." The first issue we need to address, she began, her voice clear and precise, is the prosecution's reliance on circumstantial evidence. Take Exhibit B, for example, the surveillance video. The prosecutor, still fuming, crossed his arms with disdain. The video clearly shows you at the crime scene, he snapped, curt. Yes, she nodded, not missing a beat. It shows someone who looks like me near the scene. But what you failed to mention, intentionally or not, is that the timestamp on that video is missing. Plus, it was obtained from an unverified source, breaking the chain of custody. Your Honor, without proper authentication, this evidence shouldn't be admissible. The judge glanced at the prosecutor, his frown deepening again. Is that true? He asked, his voice laced with suspicion. The prosecutor hesitated, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, scrambling for an excuse. The video is reliable, he tried to argue, but Karoline pressed on, relentless. Is it? Because I have a forensic analyst's report here detailing every inconsistency in that file. I can submit it to the court." The judge nodded, and she handed the report to the bailiff, who brought it to the bench. The judge reviewed it, his expression darkening with every line he read. "This raises serious questions," he murmured, almost to himself. The prosecutor looked like he wanted to vanish under the table. "Your Honor, this is just a tactic to derail the case," he cried, desperate. "No," Karoline interrupted, her voice firm as a hammer. "This is called due process, something you seem to have completely overlooked." A murmur of approval rippled through the room, and she could sense the subtle shift. People were starting to believe in her, to root for her silently, but she wasn't done, not by a long shot. "Next," she continued, walking to her table and picking up another document with the same calm as a queen on her throne, "let's talk about Exhibit D, the supposed confession. This paper was signed after hours of interrogation with no legal representation present. Under federal law, that's a clear violation of my rights." The prosecutor shot back, furious. "You didn't ask for a lawyer." "I didn't have to," she countered, her voice solid as a mountain. "Mayors are entitled to legal representation, period. It's the law. But let's set that aside for a moment. Even if you accept it, it's riddled with errors. For example, the address listed there is wrong. I've never lived there, and that's a matter of public record." The judge, his face now unreadable, turned to the prosecutor. "Do you have an explanation for this?" he asked, his tone icy. The prosecutor flipped through his papers frantically, as if the answers might magically appear. He stammered, lost. "He doesn't," Karoline cut in, unrelenting, "because he didn't do his homework. He thought this case would be an easy win, that I wouldn't fight back. But here we are, and I'm not giving up." The judge raised a hand, silencing both sides, then leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on Karoline as if trying to size her up. "Ms. Leavitt," he said slowly, with a mix of curiosity and respect, "what exactly are you trying to accomplish here?" She straightened, meeting his eyes with a confidence that filled the room. "I want to show this court that the justice system isn't about winning or losing," she said, her voice ringing with contained passion. "It's about the truth, and the truth is, this case is built on shaky evidence and even shakier assumptions." The room fell into a deathly silence, the kind of quiet where every creak of the wooden benches sounded like thunder. Judge Carter sat motionless, his eyes locked on Karoline. The weight of her arguments, her surgical precision, and that unshakable confidence hung in the air like a thick fog. Finally he spoke. "Well," he began, his tone more measured than ever, "Miss Leavitt, you've certainly given us a lot to think about." Karoline stood tall, her hands resting lightly on the table in front of her. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk with arrogance, just waited calm and composed, as if she already knew what was coming. The judge turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Hernandez," he said, his voice firm, "it's clear to me that there are serious issues with the evidence presented in this case. The chain of custody for Exhibit B is compromised, and Exhibit D is inadmissible due to clear violations of the defendant's rights. I have no choice but to throw out these pieces of evidence." Hernandez's face flushed a deep, almost purple red. "Your Honor, with all due respect," he tried to protest, but the judge shut him down cold. "With all due respect, Mr. Hernandez, you should have done a better job. This is my courtroom, and I won't let it turn into a circus." The prosecutor slumped in his chair, defeated, and the tension in the room began to shift. All eyes turned back to Karoline, some watching her with disbelief, others with an admiration they couldn't hide, and a few even nodding silently, recognizing her brilliance. Judge Carter cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Ms. Leavitt," he said, his tone softer now, almost apologetic, "I have to admit, I misjudged you. I thought you were just a former press secretary in over her head. I was wrong, and I'll own that." Karoline didn't reply right away. She let his words settle, let the weight of that admission fill the space. Then, with a voice quiet but brimming with meaning, she said, "Thank you, Your Honor, but this isn't about me. It's about holding everyone, prosecutors, judges, even lawyers like me, to a higher standard. That's what justice should be." The judge nodded slowly, as if her words had struck him somewhere deep. "Well said," he replied, taking a long breath before delivering his final ruling. "Based on the lack of credible evidence and the procedural errors laid bare here, I have no choice but to dismiss this case. Ms. Leavitt, you're free to go." The gallery erupted in a mix of applause, whispers, and a few angry footsteps from those storming out, dissatisfied with the outcome. Karoline stood there for a moment, letting it all wash over her like a gentle wave. Then, with a small, respectful nod to the judge, she gathered her papers and turned to leave. As she walked down the center aisle, people parted to let her pass. Some stared in pure awe, others with newfound respect. But Karoline didn't linger to soak it in. She pushed through the heavy double doors and stepped out into the bright sunlight. The second she set foot outside, a reporter pounced, microphone in hand. "Miss Leavitt, can you tell us how you pulled this off? What's your secret?" Karoline paused and looked straight into the camera, her eyes shining with a mix of strength and humility. "There's no secret," she said, her voice clear as day. "The law is meant to serve everyone, not just those who fit a certain mold. People like me, young, black, underestimated, were capable of more than they think. Today wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about proving that intelligence and determination don't come with an age limit." With that, she turned and walked away, head held high, as the crowd outside watched her go. Some still whispered in disbelief, others clearly inspired. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just a former White House press secretary, nor just a lawyer. She was a living reminder that sometimes the person you least expect is the one who changes the whole game. Now, here's my take. Karoline Leavitt's story hits me hard because it's proof that brilliance doesn't wait for permission or age. She flipped the script on a system that loves to box people in, and that's inspiring as hell, especially for anyone who's ever been underestimated. I see her as a wake-up call. Talent and grit can come from anywhere, anytime. But I get it. Some might argue she's an exception, not the rule, or that the system still worked by letting her shine. Fair point. Maybe it's both, a crack in the armor and a testament to what's possible. What do you think? Does her win change the game, or is it just a rare spark? Thanks for sticking with me on this one. Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button if it sparked something in you, and subscribe for more stories that make us think.